Support comes from Soaring Heart Natural Beds, where concern for the health and safety of sleep now extends to everything from curbside pickup and delivery to secure in-store appointments. Showrooms in Seattle, Bellevue, and now in Edmonds, or online at soaringheart.com.
Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. A historic vote in the House of Representatives today as lawmakers decide whether to impeach President Trump for a second time. Among those voting yes will be Seattle Congressional Rep. Pramila Jayapal. She'll make her case in a minute. First, let's get you caught up. A Washington state Republican is now on board the push to impeach President Trump again in the final days of his administration. Last night, Congresswoman Jaime Herrera Beutler of Vancouver became the fifth House GOP lawmaker to say they'd vote yes. Herrera Beutler had to take cover in the House gallery during last week's insurrection. She said the president incited a riot, aiming to halt the peaceful transfer of power, and did nothing to stop it for hours. Governor Inslee says the National Guard will stay put at the state capitol building in Olympia for at least another week. There won't be much action inside since state lawmakers are mostly working remotely for the rest of the legislative session. But Inslee says the state patrol recommended the extra security through the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden after Monday's FBI bulletin warning of stepped-up threats to state capitals in all 50 states. And the head of Seattle's police union says he's not going anywhere. Mike Solon used Twitter to spread a story that Black Lives Matter activists and the far left were partly to blame for last week's pro-Trump siege on the Capitol. That led to calls for his resignation from the mayor and city council. Seattle Times reports Solon told his union membership he regrets commenting on national politics, but insists his comments have been misrepresented by political critics. Today, the House of Representatives will vote on whether to impeach President Trump for the second time. That's never happened to an American president before. One of the members backing this effort is Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who represents Seattle. And late on the night before we were set to talk, Jayapal's office released a statement saying she'd tested positive for COVID-19. This after being sequestered among some maskless colleagues in a safe room during the insurrection at the Capitol last week. I spoke with House Representative Pramila Jayapal on Tuesday morning to talk about how she's doing and why she believes impeachment is a necessary step. Congresswoman Jayapal, thanks so much for taking the time. I know this is a really busy time for you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So Monday night, you tested positive for COVID, and this was something you were pretty worried about after you were forced to sequester during the insurrection. You were already quarantining. How are you feeling?
I have mild symptoms. I'm doing fine. It feels a little bit like a flu. I've got a small fever of about 100 degrees, chills, sore throat, but I hope I will be fine. But yes, I started quarantining immediately after that, what I considered to be a super spreader event where we were crowded in a room and some Republicans were refusing to wear masks and some were even mocking my colleague, Lisa Blunt Rochester, as she tried to get them to put on masks. So the minute I came home after voting to certify the Electoral College vote, I immediately started quarantining and have been quarantining, thankfully, since then.
You were talking about Republicans not wearing masks during that time. How can you be sure that that is where you were exposed? Are you certain?
I am very certain. I had gotten tested before I flew to D.C. and then after I flew to D.C., and so I had tested negative both times. I am extremely careful and have been this whole year and trying to model for my constituents and for people around the country how we should be treating the seriousness of this virus. And so the only place that I could have been exposed was during that time. And it was clear, as you know, another of my colleagues, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, who is a cancer survivor, also tested positive. It's just very clear that that was the place that, that we contracted this. And I will tell you that, we were sitting in the gallery. We had to we were instructed to take off our masks because we were trapped in the gallery because of insurrectionists who were attacking the Capitol. We had to take off our masks in order to put on gas masks. And and then we had to go and quarantine, sequester in this room, secured location, where these Republicans refused to put on masks. So on top of a terrorist attack that we're fighting, we're also dealing with Republicans who every single day are willing to let people get sick and die.
You're calling for stiffer fines for members who won't wear masks and for anybody who refuses to do it to be removed from the floor. And I'm just reading from your statement that was put out by your office. This is your quote. "This is not a joke. Our lives and our livelihoods are at risk. What are you seeing that makes you think people think this is a joke?"
They won't wear masks. We've had a rule to wear masks on the floor, and they have continuously refused. And so I think we should do, similar to what the District of Columbia, what airlines do. They kick people off if they refuse to follow the rules. And I think that we should have stiff fines. In the District of Columbia, it's $1,000. It starts at $1,000 if you don't wear a mask. And I think if we don't have those kinds of things and enforce them, we are endangering everybody. And it's not just us, it's our staff, it's our families. We are contributing to the spread of this virus.
Several members of the House have tested positive for coronavirus now, and that's not the only fallout from last week's attack on the Capitol. Today, the House is set to vote on a single article of impeachment against President Trump. Now, President Trump has already been impeached, but he wasn't convicted in the Senate. You're voting to impeach him again, this time for inciting violence against the government of the United States. Why do you feel this step is necessary right now?
We watched as insurrectionists who were fueled, assisted, aided by this president came and violently overtook the Capitol. They came in prepared with tactical gear, with flexi-cuffs. There was loud talk of hanging the vice president and of capturing Nancy Pelosi. And this president incited that with his words, with his refusal to call for peace, with what we believe to be a delayed response to even take the threat that was clearly available prior to the day of January 6th of these white nationalists, white supremacists that he asked to go to the Capitol. He asked them to go to the Capitol and to fight like hell. And that is what they did. And they beat law enforcement. They dragged out Capitol Police officers, and they were looking to take hostages. So this is very clear, and I believe that we will have potentially Republicans that vote with us this time, because this president is a clear and present danger to the security of our country. He controls the nuclear codes, he controls law enforcement, the intelligence agencies, and we cannot allow him to stay in office for one day more.
I just want to take a step back for a second to talk about how all of this actually began. Several of your Republican colleagues voted to contest the results of the November election. Cathy McMorris Rodgers from Washington was going to do that. Then she changed her mind after the insurrection at the Capitol. Do you feel like that's enough?
Well, look, I think that I'm glad some Republicans seem to at least wake up and realize that at this point they could no longer go along with this violent plot to overthrow the government. And so I'm glad that she did that. But I have to say that these are Republicans who have been aiding and abetting this president all along the way. Remember, Patricia, a year ago, I sat on the Judiciary Committee during the first impeachment trial, and my opening words were that the president is the smoking gun, and that smoking gun is reloaded, and whether or not it gets fired again is up to us. And Republicans refused at that point to admit what this president was doing. And that has continued. 6 months ago, I questioned Attorney General Bill Barr on the Judiciary Committee about the discrepancy between how the Department of Justice was treating the threats of militant armed militia that were storming the Michigan State Capitol versus how they were treating Black Lives Matter protesters. They did not take that seriously. Those were precursors, trial runs, if you will. Those storming of the Michigan State Capitol, which ended up in a plot to try and take hostage and assassinate the governor of Michigan, that was a precursor to what happened. So I think that we need Republicans to do the right thing right now, but I also have to say that it is difficult to not look at this entire last year and longer and not want to hold Republicans accountable for continuing to go along with the president.
We certainly are at a really uncertain time in the United States history. You immigrated to the U.S. from India at 16. You said your parents sent you here to make a better life for yourself. And for all intents and purposes, it seems like it worked. You're basically living the American dream. Putting aside your role in politics, as an immigrant and as an American, how are these events hitting you?
Well, it's been tough. I am tough, and I'm a fighter, and I've been fighting for civil rights and to just move that moral arc of the universe more quickly towards justice. So grateful to this country for taking me in. And so many of us as immigrants never thought in a million years that we would see happening in the United States what we have seen in dictatorships around the world. I think for us, perhaps it's even stronger because we came from other places to this great and shining light that was the United States of America. And unfortunately, I think we are in a deep, dark place in this country, and it is going to take a lot to bring us back. But I am 150% committed to doing that, because when I swore to be a United States citizen, that meant you take everything. You take the good, you take the bad, and you fight for the best of who America is, which we know exists. We just have to find ourselves again and assert ourselves again as that great country that I believe we can be.
Congresswoman Jayapal, really appreciate your time. Pramila Jayapal represents Washington State in the House of Representatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
After we recorded this interview, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi introduced rules to fine members for not wearing masks on the House floor. $500 for the first offense and $2,500 for the second offense. Seattle Now is produced by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Clare McGrane, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.